Welcome to Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Kunitsu-Gami, The Path of the Goddess. I played on the Xbox Series X. It's also available on the Xbox Series S, Xbox One, PS4, PS5, and PC. So this game takes place on the mythical Mount Kafuku. The priestess Yoshiro is forced to flee and purify the defilement along her way down the mountain. She is aided by her guardian spirit So, which is the character you actually play as. And really, that is the extent of the story. There are some minor twists and turns along the way, but overall, it's a very simplistic story. This game is a much more gameplay-driven type of game. What I will say about the story is that it is interesting because it's predominantly told visually. There's not a lot of audio to it, which I'm gonna get into the audio now then, I guess. Which is, there's really no voiceover work to this. There's some very limited things you get to hear, and that's generally during gameplay rather than campaign. Sorry, I mean cinematic. It's your normal efforts, it's callouts, it's things like that. It's not real storytelling voiceover work. Then you've got the music, which is kind of hit or miss for me. Some of it I think really fits. Generally the music in the quieter times when you're exploring the areas that you've freed from the defilement. I think that music fits the overall historical Japanese vibe. And also when you're doing the regular missions. It's the music in the boss fights that I feel feels out of place. Not that it's bad, it's just a weird juxtaposition compared to all the other music and the visuals. It gets kind of like rock and almost metal, not really quite metal, but it turns into some rock, hard rockish music, which is just kind of weird compared to the rest of the stuff. Then you've got the sound effects, which I don't have any complaints with the sound effects. I think they work well in the game, as well as they give you the cues you need when you need them, and they just work. They're not necessarily anything I'm like, oh, that's amazing. But I think they work in the context of where the game is, the time, place it is, etc. Which, let's get onto the gameplay mechanics and whatnot. And this is an interesting, almost tower defense real-time strategy game. You need to get Yoshiro from point A to point B. Sometimes the path can branch a little bit, but that is your main objective. Unfortunately, point B has enemies coming out of it, and occasionally from other areas as well. Now, how does that work? There's a day and night cycle, and during the day, that's when you get to prep, and that's when Yoshiro gets to walk down the path. By prep, you get to run around and grab villagers and crystals. You grab the villagers, you turn them into combatants. Basically, they can be woodcutters, archers, riflemen, spearmen, all sorts of other things, healers, etc. The crystals are basically your currency, and then there's all sorts of other little things. There's defilement to be rid of, and if you get rid of a certain number of them in each area, you get an item that will help you when you equip it. It can either be attached to your sword, or it can be some other item that can help all your villagers, give them more health, give So more health, or have him do more damage, etc. But then when night rolls around, you can position your guys to defend Yoshiro. And I will say, I didn't go crazy with it. I generally stuck to the folks that worked for me, which are ones that I just listed off. But there are other classes, I just didn't find them necessary. Maybe I would have if I were trying to complete all the side objectives that you're not really aware of immediately, but you get told that you didn't complete them at the end of each mission, so it encourages you to replay the mission. Now, I mentioned the villages that you freed from the defilement. You get to run around those and rebuild them, or set villagers to rebuild them, and then you go into a mission, you come back, and stuff has been rebuilt. It's kind of cool. That's also how you upgrade your character. Checking out the fixed houses and other areas in the village, you get another form of currency where you get to upgrade your villagers as well as So. But it is kind of cool because it lets you see what the village looked like, what all the areas basically on the mountain looked like before the seed had leaked. I don't know why I said leaked, but they've taken over the mountain and defiled it. Now let's move on to the controls, and overall I like the controls. I think they work well for what you're doing. I personally liked to zoom my camera out and kind of position it so it was much more of an isometric game. The camera controls took me a minute. It just kind of feels weird having a free-floating camera in that kind of situation, but I will say there were times where it was very beneficial. Overall, I was happy with the controls. They're easy to adapt to and learn, so I'm not gonna piss and moan about them. Got nothing bad to say. Now let's move on to the graphics and visuals, and this game is very bright and colorful and dark at times, and very heavily inspired by, I assume, Japanese myth, and they love their masks. I mean, most of the characters look like they're straight out of what you would imagine from like a samurai drama. And Yoshiro and So look like they're wearing very traditional ceremonial garb. And I think it works. I think it's a cool design. I don't necessarily love all the mask designs, but I do appreciate the amount of detail that goes into each of the masks. And I point out the masks because each of the different classes that you use in combat have their own mask as well as their own clothing style. So I actually thought that was really cool and I liked that. And you get a good look at the masks, like when you're doing the upgrades, and you actually get a really good look at the villager designs and the class designs when you're doing the upgrades. And I really appreciated that. I thought they made, quite frankly, some really beautiful designs. I also love the villages and the areas you go to. I think once you've cleared the defilement, it's just really pretty. They do a great job of selling exactly the vibe that they're trying to sell, which I think is awesome, quite frankly. I really appreciate it. It is really relaxing to go to the village in between the missions, especially as you fix more of the village, the nicer it gets, the more plant life there is, the more wildlife there is. It's just really cool. But then let's get to the defiled areas. Honestly, they're everything I would want them to be in this game. They're creepy and dark, and then there are literally areas where it's dark and you have to light lamps so that your villagers can see to fight the enemies. I thought that was a fun way to incorporate what's going on as well as a gameplay element and a visual element. And then there's the seeth designs. You start with the really basic, here's this guy, here's a slightly bigger of this guy, then there's the much bigger of this guy, which is harder to kill. But each level, they add something new. They add a new special type of seeth, which is got its own unique design and its own unique abilities. And some of them are sufficiently disgusting, some of them are kind of mesmerizing, some of them are incredibly spooky. I think they did a great job with the variety of seeth that you combat. And then you've got your bosses, which I loved all the different designs for the bosses. They really fit each area. They clearly put a lot of thought and effort and love into this artwork. And I almost forgot to discuss it, but it needs to be talked about, is this game is very visual in the sense of dancing. Yoshiro, when she is walking down the path, she is dancing. When she is clearing the defilement, she is dancing. So is also dancing, so are the villagers. And I think the motion capture for that is actually really cool and really well done. I do wish there were a wider variety of dances, which sounds kind of weird, but I think after a while you've seen the same dance at the end of the mission so many times, it would be kind of cool to have a bit more variety. Also, if you leave the villagers standing around long enough, they'll start dancing, and even So has like his dance attacks. They're basically his heavy attacks, but they're very artistic and they're very clearly more inspired by dance moves than they are actual combat, which is an interesting way to go about it. But from a visual standpoint, it's really cool. I just really gotta say, I think it was a very beautiful game. Now, to get into the wrap up, I clearly enjoyed this game. I really had a good time with it, but I gotta say, it's a $50 game and I don't think it quite hits that. For me, I would be more comfortable recommending it at like $40. I know that doesn't sound like a big difference, but it just doesn't quite hit that $50 mark in my mind. I did see that it is on Xbox Game Pass, so if you have Game Pass, I think it's definitely worth downloading and playing. I don't have a problem recommending it. I would just say $10 cheaper. Okay, in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, we've got gaming season coming up pretty soon. What game are you most excited for? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one. Yoshiro is able... Fuck me.